Hey there, good to see you. This is a two-part video about the new local adjustment and masking tools that Adobe recently added to Adobe Camera RAW, Lightroom, and Lightroom Classic. This video here, part one, is a technical walkthrough, a general overview of what's new, what's changed, what's different. And then part two is going to be more philosophical, like more about the creative use and application of local adjustments in Lightroom to fix technical problems like balancing exposure and using local adjustments to visually enhance a raw image using classic dodging and burning techniques. That image you just saw, in case you're curious to know, something like, I don't know, 90 or 95% of the edits that were made we're all done using masks. We're all done using that local adjustment tool. I barely touched the global settings. So we'll get into that photo in depth next time. But I want to begin this video here by taking a look at the new tools and taking a look at the changes that Adobe has made. So I'm using Adobe Lightroom Classic here. And actually, let me go ahead and put this in full screen mode. And if we hop over here to the develop view and then click on this mask icon at the top right, you'll notice that the toolbar has been cleaned up a little bit. The linear gradient and the brush and the radial gradient have now been moved into this panel here. And inside this panel, you will see that there are two additional options up here at the top. There is select subject and select sky. How does Lightroom know what the subject is or the sky? Well, I mean, this is the new world of computational photo editing that, you know, Adobe's been investing a lot of resources into, other companies have as well. And it's really interesting to see where it's going. So, I mean, we'll get a little bit more into this in a minute, but these tools do exactly that. Like select subject will figure out, or it'll guess what it thinks your subject is and put a mask on top of it. And select sky does the same thing. Select sky is actually fantastic if you're into landscape photography like me, because masking the sky and doing different settings for it versus say like a mountain range in front of it, something like that, very common thing to do. And select sky comes in very handy. And then color range and luminance range, these are masks that are generated by, you know, either picking a hue, like I could choose like red and orange, and the mask would automatically be applied to anywhere that color appears in the image. And then you have luminance range, which picks, which creates a mask based on the luminance value of pixels. So you could choose like all the brightest pixels in your shot, the darkest pixels in your shot, whatever it is that you're trying to select. And what I think is so fantastic about this new interface, I mean, seriously, I think Adobe's product design and engineering team just did such a good job here, because they improved the power. Like they just made it so much more powerful than it was before, but without sacrificing usability and without sacrificing the user experience of it. All right, let's jump in here and just create a basic, simple linear gradient mask to get started. And by the way, I apologize if you hear the fans in my laptop right now. It is completely freaking out. I think because I'm recording the screen at the same time and I'm editing raw images here. I really need to get a new laptop. All right, now I'm just going to drag this linear gradient in from the left side of the image, because what I want to do here creatively is I want to bring down the ambient light. I want to reduce the brightness on the left-hand side of the frame, and a linear gradient is a great tool for doing something like that. Okay, so this red color here, now you can toggle this on and off by just tapping O on your keyboard. That will show and hide the overlay. And actually, if you don't like red, you can change this to anything you want. Green, I think, works really well, especially if your image has a lot of red in it and it's hard to see the mask. Another cool option is in this ellipsis drop down over here, where you have this mask overlay mode. You can change this to color overlay on black and white, and that'll change the image underneath the image temporarily to a monochrome image. So then color is removed from the equation, and it's easier to see the luminance values in your image when you are making adjustments. What I want to do here, again, is I want to bring down the brightness values on that left side of the frame. Now, I can just grab the exposure slider and make my adjustment, bring it down to the left, and mission accomplished, right? So I've darkened the left side of the frame. Well, yes and no. The problem here with the change that I just made, and actually let me just hide the mask here, which you can do by clicking on this little eyeball over here, is that you see how there is this like a darker kind of area of the image down here in the lower left? That area is already dark. Like I don't necessarily need for my shadows to get darker. I don't need to like push my shadows into the blacks and lose detail and texture that is there. I'm not worried about I'm not worried about that. Like I want to bring down the light elsewhere. I don't want to affect that area. So what we want to do is we want to, let me just turn the overlay back on again actually so you can see it. And then we're going to click on the ellipsis next to the linear gradient layer that we just created. Select intersect mask width and then choose Luminance Range. Now, what this interface is, this is like a horizontal representation of the tonal values in your image, all pixels from black to white. So black is all the way at the left, at the far left at 0, and then white is all the way at the far right at 100. But we can limit that range. We can bring it in so that we are removing those darker pixels from the mask selection so that they are not affected. Now, your instinct here may be just to grab this little arrow down here at the lower left and just drag this to the right. And as you can see, we have effectively done the job. We have removed the darker areas from our selection, and the mask is now only affecting like the midtones and higher. But there's a problem here. And the problem, if we zoom in really close and look at this, you see how hard the edge is on our selection here? Like, it's way too precise. And I mean, this is one of those things where precision is actually not a good thing. Like, you kind of want the selection to be more tapered. You want it to be more natural and not look so obvious. It'll look obvious and photoshopped if the edges are too harsh and too serrated like this. So what we need to do is we need to feather this adjustment. And to do that, you can just click on that same arrow you grabbed before and then drag it to the left. And this will taper off and effectively fade of that mask selection so that it is more gradual. Okay, so we're gonna jump over here to a second image because there's something creatively that I wanna do with this particular image here that will effectively illustrate the power that we now have with this new masking interface with Lightroom. Because the kind of thing that I'm gonna do here is usually the kind of thing you could only do in Photoshop, but now you can actually do it in Lightroom. Surprisingly, it works pretty well. Now, in case you're curious about this particular photo here that we're editing this, I captured this on the High Line up in New York last November when I went up there. Seems like every time I go to New York, like the High Line's just it's a thing you do. I love the High Line. It's such a cool place to go and spend like an hour or two in the afternoon. Absolutely love it. And the funny thing is that I took a picture of this because I immediately recognized it. This is a sculpture that is based on a photograph that was done by Richard Misrak. That was from his Desert Cantos series. He did an art project where the photographer worked with a sculptor. I don't know the sculptor's name off the top of my head, but I'll put it up here on the screen. And they collaborated to effectively bring some of his photographs to life with sculptures and musical instruments, and it's really interesting. And I just immediately recognized it, and I was like, wait a minute, because I recently had been researching this project of his, and anyway, I'm rambling. So let's begin. What should we begin with? Let's begin with selecting the sky, and gonna let Lightroom do its thing, and let's see what it does. And yeah, again, did a pretty good job. Now, obviously, we can see that, like before, there is some of that mask that is invading the subject. It's kind of getting into the side of the building here. There's a little bit on top of this flag, and we don't want that. So let me just rename this sky. Now, over here in the panel, you will see that down here at the bottom of the mask are a couple buttons. There's one for add and one for subtract. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where you may add a mask to this mask and then effectively blend them together, effectively extending that mask. Or you can add a mask and subtract it from the parent mask in order to make a smaller mask. And that's exactly what we're gonna do here. So I'm gonna try to subtract the subject from the sky. And let's see what happens. So to do that, I'm going to click on subtract, and then I'm going to select subject, and yeah, it it did a pretty good job. And see the change it made? Like, the flag is actually standing out now. Like, it's no longer selected by the sky mask. Now, it's not quite perfect still. I mean, let's see, if we zoom into this building over here, you can see there's still some pink on the edge over here. But what we can do with that is we can, again, do subtract, and then we can select brush, and then we can come in here and brush out, the side of the building here. And actually what I should be using, let me do that again. Let me do subtract, brush, and then do auto mask. And that will automatically find the edges in the selection and hopefully make them a little more precise. Okay, so now that we have a sky selection that no longer includes the subject in the foreground, any edits that we make to this mask are only going to affect those pink regions, the region behind the subject, or at least that's what we hope. So let me turn off the overlay, and I'm going to drag, and this is actually one of my favorite things to do in Lightroom whenever I want to add some light and some atmosphere and soften the light, is to just apply a negative dehaze. I think a lot of times people think of dehaze as a positive thing, of like removing haze, you know, by pushing it to the left or to the right, but rather you can push it to the left and effectively add haze. It's a pretty powerful tool. I really enjoy using it. So I'm going to bring this back to the left, and that just softens the light. It removes some of that detail behind the subject, makes it stand out a little bit more. But there is a little bit of a problem. And actually, let me toggle the visibility on and off here so you can see it. Yeah, so you see how it is affecting the entire sky all the way up to the top when I toggle that on and off. That's not really what I wanted. Like, I only wanted the effect directly behind the subject. I like to keep some of that blue sky up above. Well, here is where, rather conveniently, we can apply another mask, or rather we can subtract another mask. And what we're going to do here is we are going to subtract, can't talk today. We are going to subtract a linear gradient. So let me do subtract again. We're going to do linear gradient, and then tap O to turn on the mask so we can see it. And then I'm going to drag this down over the top of the image. Now the thing to note here, you see what's happening? So the sky is pink, it has that red color directly behind the subject, whereas the top of the image is now blue. And so now this effect is directly behind the subject and is limited to that one area. So, and that is with it on, and that is with it off. Yeah, and you see how the glow is only happening behind the subject? Yeah, I mean, I think that works really, really well. And the whole reason why this is possible, and we're able to just select that one area behind that sculpture there, is because we used 3 different masks here in order to create this one single composite mask that only lives right behind the subject, which is pretty awesome. Now, let's see. Now, let's just go ahead and create, I'm going to create another mask, and let's do select subject again, and we're going to stack another one on top. Going to double click on it, and let's do subject. Now, this is a little bit messy. See how the building behind it is also selected, probably because it's in focus and it's right next to the water tower, so it's getting a little confused. But I can bring up the exposure there a little bit. Let me toggle the mask panel on and off so we can just look at the effect of the mask. And see that? It's just that little bit of glow, that little bit of, you know, pop in the image right there in the center. It's very subtle, but I think it makes a difference. I think it works really well. Okay, let's create another type of mask. Now, you see this grass that's down here in the front. Let's do a color one now so that we can affect that. So what we want to do now is come up here and go to create new mask, and we're going to do color range. And when you do color range, you get this little eyedropper here, and I can click on the grass. Yeah, I mean, that generally looks pretty good to me. And let's just double click on this and let's rename this grass. Now you see how that color overlay also selected the building back here. Let me toggle this on and off. You see that? It's actually not just the building. It actually selected some of our subject here too, and that's not what we want. So what we can do is, again, mask the mask, and we can subtract a mask from this one. So let's do this. What we're going to do is we're going to do a hard linear gradient to effectively separate the bottom of the image from the top. So I'm going to go back here to subtract, do linear gradient, and then I'm just going to hold down the shift key so that it's level, and just do a very short mask like that. So going to drag this down. Now only the bottom area of the image, now only the grass has been selected, because now we have effectively subtracted the top from our selection, and any adjustments we make are only going to be affecting the bottom of the image. Now, I'm going a little crazy here with this, but I'm just doing this purely for demonstration purposes so you're able to see it. So you get the idea, right? I mean, I think what's so brilliant about this new local adjustment and masking interface in Camera Raw and Lightroom is the fact that it is as simple or as complex as you need it to be or you want it to be. Like if you just want, to use it in a simple way and just drag some masks on and make some basic adjustments, you can absolutely do that. But if you want to go even further and be more complex and a little more precise by combining and adding and removing, like one mask from another and essentially creating composite masks by stacking them all up on top of each other, just like I was doing there by combining the sky with the subject and the linear gradient just to isolate that one part of the sky. Really cool. So if you've yet to spend any quality time with the new masking tools that are in Adobe Camera RAW, which is built into Bridge and Photoshop, or Adobe Lightroom or Adobe Lightroom Classic, would highly recommend you do so because it is such a powerful and intuitive tool that really will make a difference with your photo editing, with your raw photo editing. It would definitely be time well spent. And honestly, there's just so much that could be done here that it's too much for a single video. So next time in part 2, I'm going to return to the local adjustments panel here in Lightroom Classic, and I'm going to edit a raw image from beginning to end, from a straight out of camera raw image all the way through to a finished image. And I'm also going to take some time in that video to talk more about like the why behind it, not just the how and demonstrating something technically, but also talking about the creative side of it, like why you would want to be dodging and burning in a particular way, why I'm shaping the light in a particular way, things of that nature. So it's going to be both technical and creative as well. So if you would like to see that video in the future and you want to be notified when it comes out and you don't want to miss it, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you have not done so already. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you learned something from it, please take a second and give this video a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. That's it for me. I'll see you next time.